5 o'clock, I will call the board workshop of the WISD Board of Trustees to order. Let the record show that we have 6 trustees in attendance tonight. Mr. Starnader is absent. Also, please let them know this meeting has been duly called and notice of the meeting has been duly posted for time and manner required by law. First item on our agenda will be open forum. If there are any individuals signed up to speak. Do we have any, Ms. Bridges?
No, sir.
Okay. All right, moving along, we'll go to the discussion of plan to address the district growth, specifically a demographic report. And I will let the members of the audience know that this is going to be like an interactive workshop. At any time you have a question, comment, you can raise your hand, speak. As we go through, you don't have to wait. We're not going to make this formal. We're going to make it interactive, and it's going to be very, very informal. So as we move along, feel free to, if you have any questions, comments, opinions, whatnot, we're more than welcome to say what you need to say. Okay, who's doing the demographic report? Oh, there he is.
Were you going to start with your recommendation and then his, or do you want him to go first?
Let's present the plot. But thank you. Trent, you're so popular, we moved you from the smaller room to the larger room.
That's great, I guess. All right, so I'm not. All right. So good evening. I'm Trent Smith. I'm with Templeton Demographics, and now Zonda Education is where we're headed, coming not too distant future, but you'll find out more about that along the road. But basically, we're the same people, and we're going to have a different color shirt next time. But other than that, this is your fall report for 2021. And many of you have seen this before. I'm going to kind of go through it. We're going to look at your enrollment history. We'll look a little bit at the economy. We'll look at some housing data, and then we'll look at your 10-year enrollment forecast. So we'll start with the enrollment history. So the top table that you see here is your enrollment history. And so the largest class of that particular year is in yellow. The second largest class is in green. And so this year, your largest class is your freshman class, which is not unusual. Most districts of this size, that's the case. The freshmen that, in most cases, the freshmen didn't quite get enough, credits to be a sophomore. So all of those that are probably in sophomore classes still have to be counted as freshmen. And so you get that, we call them freshmores. And so that makes your freshman class your largest class. Now, your 10th grade class is your second largest class this year, which is 836 kids. And so one of the things that we've seen across because of COVID, we've seen less freshmores this year than we've ever seen in the past multitude of years. And so because of that, we are having a lot of large 10th grade classes this year. And we're also seeing a lot of that higher level, processing through the high school areas where, because we didn't have as much, drop off or any of that kind of thing because of some of the ways that that those had to deal with COVID, and some of those classes became a little bit different and maybe easier, however you want to say it, but more people kind of stayed through those classes. And so you guys were no exception to that. A couple of things that, overall, you're at 2.2% growth. We did expect you to be much higher. You're actually down off of our projections about 3.5 or 3.2%. And so, which is actually a little lighter than a lot of the districts that we saw. So you guys did a little better than most as far as that goes. We did see a large decline really in pre-K. And then now one thing that was unusual for you guys, you still had quite a bit of growth at kindergarten. And so what we saw across most districts is we saw a pretty sizable decline in kindergarten. But overall, your amount of growth in your elementary classes is much lower than expected. And that's where we saw the most decline in classes across almost all districts in the DFW area. When we look at what has gone on in the DFW area because of COVID, These are all the districts that we work with in the DFW market. So this is a heat map showing you how far off of our projections they were. And you can see that, Denton, Louisville, Salina, several of those up there in that area were much lower than we were expecting. None of them hit that 7%, but we had several between that 5 and 7% off of our projections. Like I mentioned before, you guys were at 3.23 or something like that, 3.3% off of our projections. And so you're, fell into that, 2 to 5% range. We only had one district that was above our projection, that was community. And so a little bit of an anomaly out there. But other than that, you can see that overall we saw a significant decline in enrollment across the DFW market. The economy, obviously went through major changes back in March, into April. The unemployment jumped from below 4% up to above 12%. Got right up to almost 13% in the DFW market, got above 13% in Texas. And you can see over on the right, those bar charts, where we were last year and versus where we are this year. And this is through September. And so when you look at the U.S. was at 3.3%, now we're at 7.7%. And as far as Ellis County goes, you were at 3% unemployment last year, and at Ellis County, you're at 6.4%. Now, those numbers have kind of fluctuated and stayed at that level, and most economists think that we're going to get back down, as we move through COVID, but we're not going to get back down to those, below 4%. We're likely going to be at that 5 to 6% for quite a while before we get back, before we can make it back down into those 3s and 4s. Where's Waxahachie compared to in the housing market compared to the rest of the DFW market? You guys had, this is based on annual closings, so you guys are number 14. You're at 828 annual closings this year through the third quarter of 2020. And as far as starts go, these are annualized starts and closes, so you had 766 starts, and you had 385 in your inventory. So inventory is your finished vacant, your model homes, and under construction all combined. So that's your inventory. And then you've got vacant developed lots, or VDL, 919 of those, and almost 20,000 futures moving forward that we already know about. That does not include the raw land and things that's still very much a part of the district. We look at where we are this year through the first 3 quarters. This is a comparison to annual, the year all the way through the year. So 2020, you're already at 621 closes and 559 starts. And so, you're going to be very close to that. Last year you had 700 starts. You're likely going to get pretty close to that again. And so we're expecting that right around that 700 number for your annual starts, and up over probably 750 to almost 800 in your closes again, in your annual closes, which will be a record. When you look, so this is getting into what's going on in the housing market right now. So right now, this is your annual closing distribution. So where are the closings happening right now? You can see, number 1 is North Grove. They had 212 annual closings just in that one subdivision alone. They've got 58 quarter closes. They've still got 180 vacant developed lots and still another 850 futures to go there. Then you've got, Settlers Glen was your number 2 with 117 closes there. And then as you can see, it kind of goes down, into the 70s and 50s after that. But you can see there's a high concentration in that Simpson, Felty area of your top, selling subdivisions. Then when you look at your vacant developed lots, so that was what's happening now. Vacant developed lots is what's coming down the pipe, right? So that's the next 18 months to 2 years. So North Grove, again, still 180 they've got the most vacant developed lots out of any other subdivision. So they're going to continue on that same pace that they've been on. Then you've got, Blue Bonnet Trails, 130 vacant developed lots there, and they've just gotten started. That's why they've got 15 annual closes, but that all came in the third quarter. So they're really just getting going. Then you've got, Arbor at Willow Grove, 95 vacant developed lots there. They're just getting started. Haven't closed any homes there yet. And so there, several of those, Shepherd's Place, Pioneer Point, most of those don't have a whole lot of history, but they're all now available to build on. So you've got a great lot supply moving into 2021. Then here's your futures. So your futures are those areas where it's anywhere from raw land all the way through to vacant developed lots. So it could be any of those type of areas. Emery Lake, obviously number one, with about 9,500 futures that we predict coming at some point down the road. Saddlebrook Estates still has 4,200 futures there to go. Lonesome Dove, 1,153. So you can see you've got some very, very large subdivisions that once they get started, they're going to continue to generate those high numbers to get you guys moving to where you're hitting that, 750, 800 homes a year, maybe even 1,000 homes a year down the road. And so this district's going to continue to grow at quite a high pace. Then you've got, so this is just kind of breaking those three maps down together into a table. Simpson is definitely your highest, active area. So the yellow areas are your highest areas of activity. Green is number 2, and the kind of that pink color is number 3. And so those are your, when you look at this, you've definitely got numbers 1, 2, and 3 as far as what school zones are the highest, activity numbers. Simpson number 1, Felty number 2, and then you've got Clift at number 3. But then when you look at the futures, you can see that Wedgeworth is going to come along at some point and be your number 1 somewhere down the road. So this is an overview map. This is showing you your elementary zones as they are right now. And with the green areas are your active home subdivisions. Your yellow areas are your areas that are your future subdivisions. And if they're outlined in red, that means that they've got lots under construction. So that means they're developing lots right now with, for future development. You've got 36 active subdivisions right now with about 20,000 futures. And then you've got about 1,320 lots that are under development. And so within the next 12 months, they're going to be putting those vacant developed lots into the pipeline. And so that's in 8 different subdivisions there. So we'll look at a few of those real quick. Bluebonnet Trail, 262 total lots there, 130 vacant developed lots with 9 homes under construction. Phases 1 and 2 have been delivered and are home building. And then phase 3 is already in the planning stages. They're expecting to build about 50 homes a year there. Camden Park, 491 total lots there with 302 futures remaining. Right now they only have 3 homes under construction, and but they're nearly, they're about out of lots. And so they're expecting they've got groundwork underway, nearing completion on those next 151 lots. And those may be already delivered at this point. This is obviously third quarter data. You've got Dove Hollow, 610 futures there. Groundwork is expected to start sometime in early 2021 with home construction mid-2022. And once they get started, they're anticipating building 100 to 120 homes a year. North Grove, your most active subdivision, 1,610 total lots there. They're only about halfway through as far as developed lots goes. So right now they've got 180 vacant developed lots. 119 was delivered in the third quarter, and they've already got homes under construction there. And then phase 2 of that groundwork is nearing completion. So that's probably already done as well. And so they're expecting to build that 200 to 250 homes a year moving forward. Then you've got Saddlebrook that is getting back going again with phase 2A, 250 lots there. Groundwork is underway, expected to deliver any time now. Developer anticipates building 100 homes a year once they get rolling again. Then you've got Sunrise at Garden Valley, 236 total future lots there with groundwork underway, expecting to start building homes in the middle this summer. and expecting to build 80 to 100 homes a year there as well. So that's just a handful. That's not all of them, obviously. You could see on the overview map that there was a lot more than that. We just wanted to kind of hit the highlights of the ones that are, we felt were most relevant. But this is a great graph here that we have. This is showing you what we're projecting your home building to be over the next 5 years, total homes, of course. And so this next year, you kind of had a little bit of a lot supply issue. So that's why your starts are a little below your closes. But we're expecting that to kind of pick back up with 1,300 lots under construction right now. So this for 2021, we're expecting it to be, right at that 800 mark as far as number of home starts. And then in 2022 to get back up close to 1,000, and then in 2023, 24, and 25 to be up well over 1,000 homes a year during those years, as well as you're expecting some multifamily during that time as well. That's what the red boxes are. That's your multifamily areas. And so back in 2019-20, you added some multifamily, but we're expecting you to add quite a bit of multifamily as well. So, probably, 400 new units out in 2023, another 200 units out in 24 and 25. And so here's the areas where we expect that home building to be. So this is a heat map of where for the next 5 years, we're expecting the most houses to be built. And so when you look at that, Clift we're expecting to have 1,433 homes built in the next 5 years. Simpson, 1,825 there, and Wedgeworth, about 1,500 there. And so those are the biggest, obviously the ones that will have the most effect, but Felty also with almost 600 in the next 5 years also. And this is just a bar graph showing that same exact thing. So you can see, Simpson, Wedgeworth, and Clift are the ones that are going to see the most activity over the next several years. So where does that put you guys? Well, this year you only grew about 204 kids. We're actually expecting you to grow almost 1,000 kids next year. And so you're going to have a bounce back. We're expecting that kindergarten to shoot up. We're expecting, a pretty good flock of first graders coming in, as well as, bounce back up with your pre-K as well, because, hopefully by next year we'll have this COVID mess out of the way. Vaccines will be in place. We know we were kind of expecting that we might see some surge back into the schools this spring, but now with the announcement of the vaccines and really feeling that most people, the average person's not likely going to see that vaccine till late spring or early summer. So we don't really expect that surge to happen as much as we first expected, because we kind of thought that it might be already through this mess already.
So should we have should we have an extended kindergarten roundup? I mean, kindergarten roundup is huge for us.
Right.
So should we have, and we usually, Ms. Mott's not here, Ms. Burkhalter, don't we start usually in April or do we start in March?
It's typically late April.
Okay, so should we like extend it into, I mean, that's a lot of kindergarten kids.
Right.
And we need to be prepared for them. So should we have an extended,
Well, I don't know kind of exactly how that program works, but if you need that time to be extra prepared, I would say absolutely. I would, I'm not going to say no.
It's a lot of kindergartners.
Absolutely, you're going to have a lot of kindergarten, and you're going to have a lot of pre-K kids too as well that, parents held them back or whatever. I think what's going to be really interesting about this year, 2021, I should say, is what exactly we will see. We're expecting for there to be, maybe 150,000 kid deficit in Texas schools this year. So, we're usually growing at 80,000 kids a year. We're expecting that to be, somewhere between 150 to 200,000 kids that just didn't show up in the system this year for whatever reason.
some more hours, yes.
And so, when you talk about, are those kids taking a gap year, or, are they all homeschool and didn't register? And there's all kinds of things that have, implications here. But we do know those kids didn't disappear; they're still here, and so we're anticipating a very good surge coming back into the school system next year. And so that really shows you why we're expecting you to grow almost 1,000 kids this next year, because of that bounce back. You know, people are still moving to Texas. We're still selling a ton of homes. Those families still have kids. And so it's not that, you know, people stopped having kids. It's that, you know, because of COVID, they're just holding their kids out of school right now. They're still there in those neighborhoods. So, sure.
It shows that we're looking to double our pre-K while we're building all these $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 homes. Our pre-K is based on our low socioeconomic.
Sure.
So how are we going to, I don't see how that.
It's kind of and a $350,000, well, if they buy a $350,000 house, they have to be on free lunch.
Sure. That's a great question. What I would say is that we base your pre-K kind of based on a little bit of a percentage of your kindergarten class. And so we look at the ratios of your kindergarten versus your pre-K. Now, what we've made some assumptions that your pre-K is going to kind of grow at a similar rate to the rest of your schools. And so that's why that's at 377. I do understand what you're saying. You've got, you know, because you are building, right. Right. Sure.
So that's, we go back to this.
Right.
Confusion.
Sure. But I think that you're about to start seeing some very creative ways that families are getting those homes. And so I do think it, you know, I don't know that I would doubt that number. I think that's a valid projection. So yeah, no, we'll find out. I mean, you were at 254 last year. So I think you could easily be up in that 350 range. You know, And so, you know, moving forward, we're expecting you to have over 13,000 kids out in 25, 26, and then out in, you know, 20, 30, 31 to be up to 16,500. And so when you look directly at your campuses, this is, you know, by campus level, we're expecting Felty to be up over 600 next year. And then they're gonna get up right close to that 700 number, and then they're gonna kind of you know, level off a little bit. And then at Cliff, expecting to be almost or be at 480, 500 the next year, 600 the following year, being up at 1,000 out in 2028 in that zone. At Northside, you know, they're going to level off at that 530 number. Then you've got Shackelford, 473 there, and expecting to be 490 next year, 500 the year after that. And they're going to get up to right that 600 number, and they're going to kind of level off pretty a little bit there for a while. At Simpson, you know, over 565 next year, being 650 the following year, being up 850 in 2024, being at 1,000 out in 27, 28. And then at Wedgeworth, being at almost 750 next year, being 790 the following year, being almost 900 in 23, 24, being over 1,000 out in 24, 25. Then you've got, you know, at the junior high level, you're in great shape out to 24, 25. Then you hit 1,000 kids at Coleman, 1,100 the following year after that. And then at Findlay, you hit 1,000 kids out in 27, 28. And then at Howard, hitting 1,000 kids out in 28, 29. At the high school, hitting 2,870 kids next year, and then hitting 3,100 kids the following year at the high school. And that is, so, you know, with 1,300 lots under excavation right now, we expect that housing market to just continue to roll. And then at the, we do expect you to add, you know, 1,000 to 1,500 new residential units annually for the next 3 to 5 years. And that's including that multifamily in that number. And then, you know, we do have potential to add another 3,500 students in the next 5 years, and in 10 years be at over 16,500 students. Okay, there's a lot of information. Any questions?
At one point, there was a formula that I had seen, it was several years ago, that for every 1,000 houses, we could expect X amount of students. Do you know what that is? Roughly what the ratio is for one student per household?
So you guys are a little over, half a student per household, about 0.55 overall.
Okay.
But your number is rising. So just 5 years ago, you were actually right at 5 or below 0.5 kids. And so your number is rising because of the nature of the build that you've got, right? The nature of these subdivisions brings kids. So those are, your newer homes are having a pretty high yield. And so that's what's driving this. So, you could expect, we used to say about 0.65 to 0.7, but now, people just aren't having as many kids overall as a general rule. And so it's really at that 0.55 to 0.6 per household. And then when if you want to take that number into consideration too, kind of a rule of thumb for an elementary is somewhere between 2,500 and 3,000 homes equals an elementary. So.
Yeah, no.
So between 2,500 rooftops and 3,000 rooftops, that will pretty much fill an elementary.
We kind of usually say, we usually say for in a year when, thank you, for a year when, with 1,000 kids coming a year, that's more than that's an elementary school and a
I mean,
fifth.
I look at Simpson and the houses that have been built around Simpson, and I don't know what the exact number is, but I know we plan on opening Simpson at about 50%, and I think we're at probably, 80?
Oh, it wasn't even 50%. It was less than 50%. And yeah, I mean, every day. At the end of the year, that will be our number one school this year. That's, again, according to your graphs. It
Right.
agrees with your graphs on.
But there hadn't been 2,500 houses built
Right.
in that zone, not even close.
But that's,
It's an oddly mathematical.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's difficult to project. I understand that.
yeah, no, that's just a general rule that we use when we just say, okay, there's going to be, 5,000 homes built in the next 5 years, which is pretty close to where you're at. So that's at least one, possibly two more elementaries in that time period. So.
Questions,
it's
comments?
definitely more than one.
Well, I think we say that'll be 1 and a 5th elementary schools, knowing those kids really go to, they're going to be, so I think
Right.
that's what, we just kind of say it in elementary terms, you're looking at it K-12, so.
Yep.
Questions or comments from anyone in the audience? But the
Have y'all seen any, with the pandemic and everything else, and obviously.
Marcus, will you
Yeah,
step
you
up there to the
gotta go to
microphone so everyone can hear you, please?
We want these words to go down in history, okay, because we're not.
With the pandemic and everything else going on, have
Marcus,
y'all-
will you state your name for the record, please?
Oh, my name?
First and last.
Marcus Armstrong.
Thank you.
120 Auburn Street, like I'm a city councilman. Have y'all seen with COVID, and obviously we're still kind of on the front end of that and how it's going to change. Obviously it's affected business and how people do business and everything else. With as many people who are able to go remotely now, is that kind of going to be fractional or marginal compared to the new kids coming in, or if you had a crystal ball, I guess, so to speak?
Yeah, so are you asking that because the parents are now remote, are the kids going to be remote?
Yeah.
Is that the question? So it's kind of crystal ball there.
Yeah.
Because, there's going to be a lot more people working remote. I'm one of those people, so I fully understand how that works. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to put their kids on remote. So it'll kind of come down to whether they believe that remote system is successful or not.
And we have to have a seat for them, because any day, I mean, they don't have to wait till the end of the semester or next year. Any day they decide,
That's
I mean, when their boss says, come back to work, I guarantee that student's coming back to our school, And we welcome them back, but so, yeah, we kind of have to make certain we have a seat for everybody, whether or not they're, but I agree also, Marcus, this has changed us forever. And we kind of count on that some, but seems to be, so far it's been very erratic.
No, and that is something that we're going to have to watch and see, is that I would say, especially at the secondary level, is where I think you'll see a change, where, maybe 5% were remote prior to the pandemic. That number may be 10 or 15% now. But I do also know that it doesn't work for all kids. So, a lot of those kids haven't been as successful.
And it's the supervision, it's one thing leaving a 10th grader at home. You can't leave your kindergartner at
Yeah,
home.
you can't leave your kindergarten.
And there's always that socialization piece at the elementary level that high school parents probably already think they're social enough.
Right. No,
So, yes, we agree with that.
Yep. It'll be interesting from a demographer's perspective. It's going to be a case study that we're going to follow very closely.
Any other questions, comments? All right, Mr. Calden,
Yes, sir.
I believe you're
Now,
next.
we have problems, Mr.
Yeah, so
President, and now we have solutions.
we had the problem presented. I believe you're supposed to present a possible solution, am I correct?
The deer in the headlights.
I'm getting all kinds of messed up here.
Don't go far, Trent.
Yeah.
There we go.
All right, thanks. All right, so with that information, Dr. Kane had asked for a possible proposal to the board for a bond in May. What would be the items that we would need to explore? So just kind of quickly running through, the recommendation would be a bond to include 2 elementary schools, one to open for the 22-23 school year on land that would be around the high school, so on that western side of town. That would go to address some of those growing concerns in the Wedgeworth zone and the Emery Lakes subdivision and Lonesome Dove that would be going in north of the high school. And then an elementary school to open in 23-24 on land to be determined at this point.
But also, Mr. Calden, because let's kind of pause at each one instead of
Yes,
going
ma'am.
down the list. Yes, check mark on the Waxahachie High School property. But we do have one piece of property that has been promised to be given to us. But again, we have to look at the demographics to make certain where the growth is, but also at the same time, I don't know that gifts of land are always open forever. So we actually had it reversed, but because of Trent's information that we've been tracking, the growth is now more at the Waxahachie High School area than where we thought it was.
Yes, ma'am. It's a really good point. So these are not set in stone. They are still fluid in terms of the location on these things. This is just my thoughts, recommendation to you at this point. The cost of each of those elementaries is roughly $27.3 million. That is a significant increase from Simpson, which was around $23 million. There are some building code differences. And
Oh, yeah, explain the one major one, the $1 million
So
building change.
one change in the building codes that added at least $1 million to each project would be the requirement for a hardened structure, like a storm shelter that would encompass the entire population of that facility in one location for the length or duration of a potential tornado or some other storm coming through. So it is a hardening of essentially the gymnasium area. And I don't want to oversimplify it, but I believe that's kind of where we're looking in the designs would be the gymnasium area that would be more rugged and more sturdy than what you're used to having in a school, which is great for safety, health, and well-being, but it also has a significant financial impact when a hurricane is not likely to hit North Texas.
And also, these would be duplicated schools.
Correct. They would be the same design on the schools. There is some consideration for building them concurrently. We would look into the cost savings of building them concurrently. We would also need to look at where that fits in with the demographic information that Mr. Smith presented, because we don't want to have a school that's just sitting there not used, but given the numbers And the increases that we're expecting over the next 5 years, I would imagine they'd be put to use pretty quickly.
Well, and we're already getting a decrease in the architect fees because the duplicated buildings we have, we're actually duplicating someone else's building, which saved us 2.5%.
It's about 2 to 2.5 or 2.25%.
So if we can save even more by building them simultaneously, it's substantial savings when you're looking at 54 million.
Yep. So the general idea behind those savings would be you have that same construction team or crew. Instead of remobilizing them for another project a couple of years later, you move them from site A to site B, and they just kind of chase each other around the two different construction sites. So you are saving yourself on that uncertainty from a bidding perspective or contracting perspective on where the next job's coming from, but also on that mobilization cost that comes with having different teams do the various projects on those buildings.
And to keep it at 27,330 in a year and not at 27 million
Yes, ma'am, and those are.
and not 28 million.
Those are based off of our consultation with the architect at this point. That's what they believe based on fourth quarter 2020 dollars, what it would cost to build those schools in those given time periods. Moving on from that second one to the third one, there would be some renovations to Coleman Junior High. The general, I guess I should have put these in the reverse order. Let me start with the fourth bullet, renovations to the Hancock building. So one piece that we would be looking at would be to move Global High School into the current Coleman Junior High building and flipping Coleman Junior High into where Global High School is right now. Global then, we would look to make that a second comprehensive high school. Global could be a school within a school. Global could be a self-contained school within that same building. We could look at putting Global down in the area that currently has DAEP and curriculum. And in consultation with the board, with the community, we could look at either have a hardened structure to where it's a physical separation between those two high school facilities, or they could have the walkway breezeway that is currently there and open up those secure doors and let them be part of that second comprehensive high school. That would include the extracurricular activities, that would include the fine arts, the band, the drama, the athletics, all those opportunities that come with the second high school. But that's not today's conversation.
But as a reminder, we did have 4 meetings to work with the global parents to find out their concerns about moving. When was that? Was that October, November, or was that November, December?
November, December.
November, December. And the first one was better attended by the global parents, and we got a lot of input. And Mr. Lynch did a great job of answering questions and talking about how this would work, and he could make certain it would work. So we already have, and again, this will be part of a subsequent conversation, but we already have had 4 meetings that we specifically targeted, made certain the global parents knew that we were talking about this.
So the major downside to this part of my recommendation to you would be the Hancock functional capacity is smaller than that of Coleman Junior High. So that's where you're seeing the renovation piece to the Hancock building to become a junior high. So you've got.
Is it actually an addition then to the renovation?
Yes, sir. It really is. It's more of an addition.
Maybe we need to
I got a
change that
little happy with my renovations, my copy and paste to try to get this slide ready. Okay. Sorry. So it would be more of an expansion. It would be an expansion of the Hancock building, because right now we got about 900 kids at Coleman Junior High, and they're not going to fit into the current Hancock building without some major improvements. So that building is roughly 650, 700.
And it was designed to be added on to. We actually have the plans from that day. That school board was very very forward-thinking.
Yes, ma'am.
And then it shows where the athletic facility would be, the athletic wing, and the fine arts wing. And it was built to be added on to.
If you built a junior high from scratch, what would that price tag be, give or take?
My best guess right now would be about 55 million. And that would be roughly capacity of 900 to 1,000 students.
That's just for the structure.
Yes.
That is going to be the structure. That's going to be any extracurricular fields around it that you would need. It's not going to be stadia. It's not going to be anything over the top fancy. It's just going to be a junior high facility.
Yeah. Land not included.
Land not included. No.
And your hardening of that's just not for elementaries, that's for all schools, right?
That is all public structures.
Well, and we need,
That are-
Public structure.
and we need 35 acres for, that's, I mean, you can do with less, like Simpson is only 11 and a half acres, but really 15 acres should be the
11.2
small, because you always have the
12.2.
parking problem, you always have the pickup problem, so the ideal junior high would be if we had at least 35
I
acres,
thought it
so.
was 50.
For a junior high?
Yes.
What we would ask for is 40 to 50. Yeah, so now if you have some shared facilities, you can definitely make it work. We could also look at a multi-story, 3-story junior high if you had to. Not ideal, but definitely, yes. My recommendation request would be let's look for 40 to 50 acres because that gives us that buffer, that spread, and we can continue with 1-story junior high model, or we could go 2, 3, whatever's pleasure of the board. Yep. There would be some renovations to Waxahachie High School as the second comprehensive high school comes on board, which would be at the current Coleman facility. We would have to put some facilities at WHS that WHS is currently using that would become part of that second comprehensive high school. So there would need to be some addition, some renovation over at the high school to accommodate those activities and facilities. One thing, as the district grows, we're always going to have the need for additional support services. And in this case, it would be a transportation facility. So we would be looking for a,
Can we back up
Yes,
to
sir.
the renovations to WHS? That would be more of an addition
Yes,
instead
sir.
of a renovation,
Yep.
correct?
yep.
Okay.
I threw in additions right there at the very end, but yes, you're right. That's an addition to WHS.
Okay.
We would need to look at a new transportation facility. I was thinking across Business 287 from the high school and some of that land that we own on the west side of Business 287. There is about 90 acres over there. Some of it is in floodplain, some of it is not. Transportation facility, for the most part, other than the building, is a glorified parking lot. So if it's in a flood zone, for the most part, you're really not that concerned with it. And then there are large parking lots across the street at the high school that we could move buses to in the event of an actual emergency with flood. We could also look at remediating some of the land in the flood zone and pull it out of the flood zone if we wanted to. But that would be a proposed location to not have to purchase land. You're looking at about 12 acres, I believe, 12 to 13 acres for that transportation facility. And it would have good access to not only Business 287, but also bypass in terms of dispatching buses across the district. There would be some renovations to some of our oldest elementary schools, Northside, Shackelford, Dunaway, and Wildman. It'd be roughly $500,000 for each campus. Renovation projects to be determined by campus and the parents of the students at those campuses. So when I say miscellaneous, I really don't know what those would entail at this point. We'd be getting those lists from them and acting on those recommendations at that point. As a district, we know we're growing. Mr. Smith tells us that we can expect roughly 5,000 more students in the next 10 years or so. And so we're going to need, at some point, we're going to have to purchase some land for some school sites. So we still have some land around the high school that we can utilize, but that's not going to sustain us forever. So asking for about $3.5 million to purchase land for future school sites. And then the deferred maintenance items at campuses. We have a lot of campuses that were built 20 to 30 years ago at this point. And there's always a need to replace air conditioners. There's always a need to consider re-roofing projects. Honestly, there are some projects that need to be looked at and contemplated that could immediately come out of this, but a lot of this is also for the things that are going to be coming up in the next 3 to 5 years that we're not exactly sure of. We think that air conditioning system is going to last for another 5 to 10 years, and it may not make it that far. This would be some money that we could use to renovate, refresh, touch all of our campuses and make sure that they have what they need, be it From a facility standpoint, a roof, or a new roof, HVAC systems, or we could even look at security improvements. We could look at technology upgrades within the campuses. We could even look at minor renovations to campuses in terms of adding, I don't know what we would look at, but some more instructional areas if we needed to. So that's, all that totals $127 million, and that is accomplishable with no tax rate increase asked to the INS fund at this point, with the large growth and values that we have seen over the last couple of years.
Sir?
Questions or comments?
Dr. Kane, you have experience with multiple high school towns, and my question, how do you deal with inequities between high schools? Let's take the ag facility for instance. Would the Coleman High School kids have access? How do you?
Well, you look at it as individual, like that ag facility is probably good for the ag program we have now and the second. Now, for the third high school will need an ag facility that size or larger. We always have inequities, just like now with elementaries, as we still hear that on the one hand, Simpson's got everything's new and shiny and all the technology's there, but we hear concerns about them. Well, we don't have the library that the other campuses do. So there's a history, but then a lot of the older ones say, well, why don't we have everything that's new and shiny? So you will always deal with that. When we build junior high number 4, it's going to be the same thing. I mean, when Coleman opened, there were concerns. Yes, they had the size and they have all the room, but they also had a lot of age on that building so it's going to be the same thing with the second high school and the third high school and the fourth high school. Even if 3 and 4 are within 3 or 4 years of each other, well, that one got this and this one doesn't have it. So you cannot, if you can solve that problem, you can retire now from the fire department as a very wealthy man.
Let me give you a more specific example. If we have a driving student and a certain program is not offered at Coleman, would they have the ability to go to WHS?
My recommendation to the board would be that we do exactly what you say. Let's say we almost got a grant for a really great HVAC program, okay? And we have a culinary program at Waxahachie High. We don't need to duplicate those programs. That we would say to a student, let's say there's a student at Waxahachie High who wants to be in HVAC. If you would like to go to high school number 2, you let us know. You get to go there as long as you can provide your own transportation. And if it's the same thing if you want to be in culinary. But you just get to do that once. Choose wisely, because a student always has the ability to go back to their home zone school. But we have the ability to say you can only leave once and come back. You can't be mad at your teacher or have a new girlfriend or whatever and go back and forth. So my recommendation to the board would be that we would open that up. And just like that culinary is a wow, and the ag facility is a wow, if we did HVAC or some other programs, those would be wows too. But we cannot afford all of those. We can afford all of those programs as a district, but we can't afford all of those programs at every high school.
Right.
So that would be my recommendation.
I have one question about the renovation of Coleman, the building, the current building. Obviously, the facilities are not adequate for, the gymnasium facilities are not adequate for a high school of any level. So is that part of the 20 million?
Yes, ma'am.
To renovate?
Yes, ma'am.
Hopefully, okay.
And fluff up, some of it's additions, some of it's paint, and a new facade is definitely modernizing kind of the outside.
Dr. Kane, yes, it needs a lot. It needs
A lot of lipstick.
fluffing. A lot of
And fortunately, when the district left the high school, someone said, we'll deal with a lot of the CTE stuff later. Michael Craig went back there, and the drops still work in the auto tech, and he said it wouldn't take that much to open it up. Now, obviously, it needs paint and cleaning up, but as far as the guts of it, it's already there, and it's a few spider webs and we're ready to go.
It's just not adequate for a high school now.
Right.
I mean, they have, I believe, two, one very
Well-
small gym
Well, and the board,
and another is very small gym.
and Ms. Kriegel, the board will control that by where how big you want that school to be.
Right.
See, the number of gyms is where you draw the line. I mean, how big, because Mr. Calden put it at 20 million, and he has a number in mind how big the school is going to be. If the board says that school is going to be bigger or smaller, then that number would be adjusted.
I don't know that you really know, but what we did was we built a new gym at the ninth grade center, which is now.
Oh, you need to turn on yours, before,
What
you're
we
getting waved
did,
at.
what we did to take care of the problem at the time was we built the new gym at the ninth grade center.
Oh, Solis.
So that added a gym, so, you know, we definitely are gonna need some
Well,
space.
and one thing I've learned in all the years there's never enough gyms. There's never enough, I mean, it's just, but they're expensive, so it's where you draw that boundary line, how many you need. So there has not been anything built that we are not going to use, and no one can say Waxahachie doesn't use its building by looking at Wyoming and the other ones that we value so much, and the maintenance department is taking such good care of.
But it's also my understanding that assuming we go to high school number 2, it's going to start as a 9th grade or a 9 and 10, and it will grow every year. It's not going to open the doors at a 4-year school.
Yes, sir, Mr. President. The board would also have a choice in that. Freshmen, Ms. Harris is really great at when the kids go to the high school, making them instantly, you're a Waxahachie Indian, and you're going to be here for 4 years. So we would start it at 9th grade. Now, if the board wanted to escalate that, what we would do we would go ahead and identify the line, who's going to go to the second high school, and as soon as the 9th graders get there, they're going to know you're just going to be at Waxahachie High 1 year. And then there would be a certain amount of involvement of what are the colors going to be? Not that the kids get to pick it, but, you know, those kids would be involved in different ways of not just knowing they're going to another school, but being a part of that startup. And then, yes, the next year, they would go there as 10th graders. The new ones would come in at 9th graders. And then we would also, the new lines to be drawn for UIL, it'll be this February. So
Yes.
next month.
You're right.
So next month, Waxahachie High will be in a new zone or the same zone and for the year that we build. So when it opens,
It'd be the following February.
it's key to how they're identified that next,
It's the first
Before
February
they
of an
open.
even year.
okay, so that would be considered too. When you
And that's
decide,
based
when
off
we
of the
decide, when the board
October-
decides if it's going to be 9 or 9/10.
October enrollment.
Questions from anyone else? About this side. Mr. Altier?
Matt Authier, 300 Magnolia Drive. In looking at it, it looks like it definitely addresses elementary and high school. What is and this may be demographer, and I wasn't looking close enough, but like for the 4th junior high, is that, if you're opening 2 elementaries within 3 school years, you know, it seems like by nature you would need a junior high at some point. But, and my answer is kind of what Mr. Rogers was saying was, instead of renovating Coleman with 20 million, I mean, does it almost make sense to kind of cut out some other stuff and go ahead and do your 4th junior high, unless that's 4 or 5 years away?
Actually, the list before this is, the 4th junior high was on here. We have several versions of this because you're absolutely right. There are 4 answers to this question of what do we do next? And we're kind of making certain assumptions that it's going to go this way. But Mr. Calden, do you want to talk about why we decided?
Long-range plan.
Yeah, the long,
To address Mr. Authier's concerns, the long-range plan would look for some sort of action in May of '23 or '24, based off of the demographic information that Mr. Smith presented. 23, 24, 25, that's when we start having, depending on rezonings, that's when we start having congestion at that junior high level, and we would really need to be looking at a fourth junior high at that point. So that 23, May 23, possibly another bond at that point, would also be looking at a high school facility at that point, even with comprehensive high school number 2. My assumption in comprehensive high school number 2, just so that we're all on the same page, would be a 4A high school. So we're looking at about 1,200 students in comprehensive high school number 2. At that level, plus what Mr. Smith is forecasting for Waxahachie High School, we're out of high school space around that 25, 26 range in terms of just fitting kids in seats. So we would need to be looking at another, that would be high school number 3 at that point. So the general plan at this point, or my recommendation to you, would be May 23 or May 24, we'd be looking at another bond, which would include 2 more elementaries. It would also
12 and 13.
Exactly. 2 more elementaries, which would be 12 and 13, a junior high, and then another high school facility at that point.
With the tendency of thinking that high school, that junior high would be on the high school property. Well, so we'd probably be building that out. We would already have an elementary there, a junior high, and a high school,
with
and a
this-
transportation facility.
With this $3.5 million to secure some land, that would be an absolute dream scenario if we could identify some land that roughly 100 acres for a high school, plus another 40 to 50 acres for a junior high. If we could find 150 acres, let's go ahead and do that. Generally, land is cheaper in larger volumes than it is in smaller volumes. So if we could find that and start identifying it, that would be great. If not, that's fine. We can work with it at that point. But to kind of address Mr. Authier's question point, that was my thinking. That would be my recommendation, because your immediate concerns right now are elementaries. Your immediate concerns with one of the last pages in that presentation, you start seeing the red numbers for over fire capacity in elementaries a lot sooner than everywhere else. Okay, I'm done at that point. I just do a random on that.
How long does it take to build a junior high
A year and a
Okay,
half.
good question. Anywhere from 1 year to about a year and a half.
in a high school?
High school's about 3 years. Now, that 3 years may be a little overstated. If you're doing a complete design and build of a high school, 3 years. We just went through that with
But if
Waxahachie
you
High School.
duplicate one,
If you're duplicating one, I'm going to assume, because I haven't directly asked this question to the architect, that you can shave at least 6 months off of that in terms of the design portion. So you could get that high school rolling hopefully in 2 years, maybe 2.5, worst case scenario. But that's me shooting from the hip right now. But you're looking at least multiple years to build a high school.
because if we passed a bond issue in February of 2023 and began construction of the high school number 3 on June 2023, then we have it scheduled to open construction, the high school and high school number 3 and junior high number 4 would be ready for business August 2026. This is
And
the Colvin
So
plan.
theoretically, this proposed plan here gets us to 2023 before we'd have to have another bond.
yes, sir, that's kind of the outlook right now. And that, when we're looking at adding 1,000 kids next year, that was not in any of our forecasts that we've looked at over the last couple of years when we look at demographics. So
And-
we've been in the ballpark of where we thought we were going to be. That 1,000 is a curveball for next year. And then the numbers beyond that are roughly at least 1 to 1.5% higher than we have been accustomed to looking at. So that it's not going to solve our problem for 10 years.
And when we look at this and have been looking at it, this is not a wish list, sir. We don't see any choices in here. There's not anything in here that we don't need or have to have. I mean, you could look at maybe transportation. Well, do you really need a transportation facility? Well, if you go over there, we've got this maintenance department, food services, and transportation, and we're going to have to start parking buses somewhere. We want the buses parked where the mechanics are and not somewhere else. And it's just like as everything else grows, then maintenance could take over the transportation facility. And I don't see even getting to 36,000 students ever having to do anything else with maintenance and transportation. We would be building them or having space for a build out. Would you agree?
I think so. I think
Now, there could
with
be
the only thing with maintenance is as we get bigger, we may have more specialties within maintenance. So we may need to look at putting additional facilities at that location. But in terms of a complete start over rebuild with maintenance, I believe your statement is pretty accurate.
Because we could always move food service somewhere. They're not that.
Yes, ma'am.
So did that answer your question, Mr. Altier? Okay, so I'm going to ask pardon the pun, but the $1 million question, what does this do to our tax rate moving forward?
So in the immediate, absolutely nothing. The district with the values that we've been adding from the new homes and then the increased in appraisals from the appraisal district, the district could support 127 million right now with no tax rate increase.
For how long?
That is assuming 6% growth for 3 years. So anything above any new debt that we would be issuing within that 3-year period would require a tax rate increase.
Can you see us accumulating more debt? I mean,
Yes, ma'am. I mean, we're talking right now, another bond possibly in '24.
oh, okay, you're talking about that.
This one in the next 2 to 3 years, no.
Between
no
this one and the next
No,
bond issue.
between this one and the next one, the
Would be
next
no.
one would be pretty much at the end of the projections for value growth on this one. The next one, I can't tell you with a high school and a junior high. I really don't think you're going to be able to do that one, no tax rate increase, just because of the size of those two projects. But right now, the immediate impact would be no change to the INS rate.
Is that about the max? Sorry.
So the question was, is that about the max? Right now, our INS tax rate is 0.3839 cents per $100 in valuation. The maximum rate that we could issue is 50 cents. So no, sir, we still have about 11 cents that we could go up on the INS tax rate. If you remember when we did the high school project, that was a 12.5 cent increase, and that was a $125 million bond. So it kind of goes to show the explosive growth in values that we've had over the last, the high school was 15. So in the last 5 years, enough that we are completely swallowing roughly the same issue size as the high school with no tax rate increase at this point. And so that goes back to, we talked during budget time back in July about our 13 and 12% property value increases. Some of that from new additions, some of that's from just value growth. That is contributing or leading to the fact that we could conceivably add $127 million in debt with no change to the tax rate. Answer that question for you? Okay.
Anyone else? Dr. Kane, you have anything you want to add?
Well, if we kind of look at our calendar, because this was an informational meeting, and I know it was someone, when we were at that safety meeting today, they talked about it was like getting information from a fire hose, and I was thinking about that tonight. We're doing to them what we kind of felt like today. Yep. So we had scheduled another workshop. We've scheduled several, just so it would be on the board's calendar, so that if we needed one. The next one is, I think, the 19th, which I wanted you to have time to digest the information, ask questions, go out in the community. I know this board's very good about going out in the community and saying, what do you think? Can you support this? We're hoping we can get a PAC going, and we want to input, feedback back from the PAC on what they feel like the community would support and what they can go out and say with a clear conscience and a big heart, look, all these people are moving here because we've got a great school system, and we're going to keep it a great school system, but we're going to count on the people moving here for us to say, thank you for moving here. We're happy you're here. We need your help. We want to keep building the beautiful facilities that we have for all the children coming in. In my experience in another district of fast growth was that actually was what happened. The people who move in because they love the way the district looks and it grows and what it's doing, and they want to support it. They don't want to come in and it changes and it's not that anymore. And the fact that there's not a tax increase, and the fact that I think everyone can look back and say we have been good stewards of the taxpayer dollars in keeping our buildings up, in repurposing them. In an example of Hancock, how many years ago was that a school board said, yes, this is a good building, but let's make certain it'll be cheaper whenever it has to be expanded. Those kinds of things, I think, give us a lot of credibility. And the fact is, with Trent's presentation, it's not a what if. The fact is, these kids will be here, and we need a place for them. And so if everybody will go out, come back with feedback for the next meeting of your suggestion. I mean, this is basically the district administration's recommendation of looking at how much money we have, because we kind of had a pre-meeting with, we've got information from Trent before tonight, that this is our solution. Also, when we do the miscellaneous campus renovations, when we go out, if the board continues with that as a recommendation from us, we will get from that parent group on each campus that the parents worked with the principal, and here is specific, not in minute detail, but like our campus renovations would include these things, because we've always got that struggle when we talk about this of we can't let a Max Simpson get so far past the Dunaway. Now, maintenance did a great job this summer with Dunaway, but then it's not enough. And Shackelford, hats off to our maintenance department, because Shackelford's a really old campus, and it does not look like a really old campus. And Northside and Wildman. So we want to make certain that we do things with the older campuses so we don't have such disparity. But that would be on the bond issue, that at Shackelford, the money would spend on this, this, and this, and then we would make certain that the parent group made certain that that's what we spend the money on. There would be an assurance, if you help pass, if you support this, this is what we're going to spend the money on your campus. And of course, the purchase of land, that is something, based on what Trent said, that we were going to be, has land ever got cheaper? Ever?
It's not getting cheaper. They're not making more of it.
So I'd like to be proactive in that and start looking at purchasing some land that we need. And I can't believe there'd be anyone in the community that wouldn't agree that if we need to buy land, one, do we need to buy land? Yes. Two, is it better to buy land now, or is it better to buy land later? So, but it's not enough for me or Mr. Calden to say, this is what we think will pass and can be supported. I need you to talk to your constituents, come back on the 19th, and that could be, and if the board agrees and says, are y'all at that meeting, change these numbers around, we would be calling a bond issue in February. We do have 2 others scheduled just in case we can't get to that point. And then if we needed another meeting, actually we could do that. But if we're going to call a bond issue, it needs to be done at the February 8th board meeting. Is that your question? Okay, we already have it scheduled for January 19th on my calendar at 5 o'clock. Same sandwiches. The ones that weren't eaten will be served on the 19th at 5 o'clock. And what it will be, basically, unless you think we need Trent, we had Trent's presentation. I think Mr. Calden's talked to Trent about it enough that we can answer these questions. So it would just be basically us saying, this was our recommendation. Is this what you want? Or do you agree?
Is a copy of his presentation available on our website?
No, sir, it hadn't been at this point.
Probably recommend that be.
Okay.
The trend, the demographic one?
Yes.
Yeah, no, that'd be great. Okay, is there any prohibition, Trent, or do we own that presentation? Okay, so it'll be on the website tomorrow. What does the board think about this recommended bond proposal? Okay, put that on there. And there's a principal meeting tomorrow, and one of the items on that is I will be going over that with the principals. And specifically, that's when I'll get the 4 principals to make certain that, actually, because we were going to have a bond issue last year, the 4 campuses came up with a list, but I want to make certain it's the same list. In one case, the principal changed.
I would encourage members of the audience to get the feedback, bring us back. We want to hear anything and everything the community has to say on, yes, we like this, no, we don't. We want to try to get this right, and we all have different facets of the community that we reach out, from the board to administration to the members in our audience. So.
And it really doesn't matter how much administration thinks this is the right plan, or even how much the board thinks this is the right plan, unless this community says this is the right plan and votes to issue bonds, then we cannot go forward.
Anyone else?
I was just gonna, I know I see people in the audience right now who aren't associated with the school district, and I appreciate them taking their time to come up here. This is a arduous task. And, you know, from somebody that bleeds green and white, taught here, played here, grew up here, it pains me to see multiple high schools added and all the growth and all that. But when you walk out of the door, your emotions don't mean anything because our community's not the same. It's growing. And we can be a slave to the growth and get behind it and let it drag us down the road, or we can try to get in front of it and do it in a cost-effective, proactive manner to try to protect us all. So any ideas that you can get, we're all ears, and I appreciate you taking the time to come, because a lot of this is done on open meetings with the doors open and posted, and nobody shows up. And then they're mad because you don't do it the way they thought you should do it, you know? I mean, the time is now to help us out, you know? It's yours. But I appreciate you taking the time out of your day.
Anyone else? All right. Thanks, everyone, for attending. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion by Mr. Schofield. Second by Ms. Kriegel. All in favor, say aye. Motion carries 6-0. Thank you very much. Oh, I'm sorry, 5-0.